This is not wrong, but I think you would struggle to prove why it's right.
Like, what is
Jesus.
the actual, yeah.
Yeah. Great. We can start. So, welcome everybody. This will be a coaching session centered around an interviewer-led case, sort of a McKinsey-style case. Um, I will be the interviewer today, and Anya is going to be the candidate. Before we go any further, I'm just gonna give her the floor for a few seconds to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anya, and I am a fresh graduate from dual business degree in from Peking University in China. And I studied business, and I really enjoyed solving complicated problems, but I also really enjoy working with people. So it made me understand that I think consulting is just the perfect career path for me. I've been doing cases back and forth, like once a week for already a couple of months. So I have an experience
Hmm.
of around 20 cases behind my belt, but I still cannot feel completely fluent in cases, and this is why I'm coming to this
Okay.
session.
Okay, good. What is it that you feel you're struggling in particular?
I think from what I received the feedback from some people I've practiced cases with,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I am not too concise. I get too much caught up in the details and I can like talk about something for
Mm-hmm.
hours.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I think most like brevity and just a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more like, to make it my second nature, to become more confident in the cases, not to
Yeah,
follow the structure, but to just feel it intuitively what I need to do right now.
I see. Okay, that's good. And you've done both interviewer and candidate-led cases.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, that's great. Do you speak Chinese, by the way? I assume
a
that,
little bit.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, should we do the case in Chinese then? Oh, this would have been
No, no,
amazing.
no, not to
Any
the point
Chinese
of
with
cases. I lived in
Cool.
China for last year,
Yeah,
and obviously in China you need to speak Chinese to survive because not many people speak English, and I've been studying it,
yeah,
so I can speak very well on the like street level,
yeah,
and to like survive and go by and go to
yeah.
a restaurant and order a taxi. But I think I could not do a case in Chinese, unfortunately. Meanwhile,
Okay,
maybe one
yeah.
day.
I can I can imagine. Yeah, and basically you're applying for roles where in Israel or
Um,
where
yeah,
specifically?
I'm currently applying in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
I I applied to the BCG and to McKinsey, and I the problem is that because of the war situation, I was
Mm-hmm.
like all the interviews were postponed to
Yeah.
January, February. So like when I was in the
Mm-hmm.
university, I applied to McKinsey and they were like, you cannot really do the process because you're abroad. And then
Yeah.
when I came, I was like, hey, I'm back. And once the day I was
Yeah.
supposed to have my PhD, we had the war. So
Uy,
they transferred all the processes. Yeah. So now
yeah.
I'm having a lot of time to prepare though. So it's good.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's definitely the silver lining of it. But yeah. Okay. Good. Well, thank you very much for the introduction, also for being here with me today. Just as a quick introduction from my side, my name is Cristian Leata. I am a coach. I work one-on-one with candidates to help them get roles within the consulting industry. In terms of my background, I spent 5 years with McKinsey, joint entry level, had a horrible first year, eventually somehow managed to rebalance myself, and then I had a very good performance, got promoted twice, loved it, then eventually realized that it's not something I want to do for the long term. So I did a sort of career shift, left after these 5 years. Since then, I've worked with over 200 candidates. I discovered that's something I actually enjoy doing, and I love to see how people grow and working with them to actually identify their spikes and take them further, and also their areas of development and coaching them closely on those areas. And though I specialize in MBB firms, I've worked with candidates all across the board. And I'm very happy that I have a sort of 100% success rate. Candidates have at least 3 interviews And this is sort of the thing that I'm trying to maintain and sort of help them see this entire process as a portfolio. And the case interview that we'll be focusing on today is something that most candidates struggle with, which is why we're trying to make more of these examples available to people so they understand what they should be paying attention to and also what they can actually expect from a coaching session. So without further ado, I will present the prompt that we'll be going through today. But let me know if there are any other questions from your side, anything else you'd like to know.
No, there is no questions. I'm ready.
No? Good. Great. So we have the following situation. There would be great if on Zoom there was sort of a drum roll. Just good. But we have the following
Say it
situation.
again.
So we have this we have a mid-sized retailer. They're called Stylescape. They sell clothing, accessories, and home goods. They do it through their physical stores and their online platform. They've been around for over a decade. They've seen consistent growth in sales in their home market of the United States. They operate in 30 stores nationwide, and they have an online platform that's relatively new, which launched only 2 years ago. And despite healthy growth, the company's leadership noticed an alarming decline in customer satisfaction ratings and an increase in customer complaints. And they're concerned that these issues will harm the company's reputation and negatively impact its bottom line. So now, basically, we're working with them to figure out what are the root causes of these issues and then to develop recommendations to address them. To begin with, what I want to understand from you is what are some of the reasons for why customer satisfaction ratings may have declined?
Okay, so thank you for an interesting case. I'm actually excited to solve it. So let me just quickly recap it, and then I would like to ask a few clarification questions if it's fine by you. Okay.
Yeah.
So our company is a mid-sized US-based retailer. It sells clothes, accessories, and home design. It has 30 physical shops and also an online platform. It's been around for 10 years and online for 2 years. And our growth was stable, but the company has been seen recently a decline in customer service ratings and also in customer satisfaction. And they are afraid that it might negatively impact sales. So the objective, as long as I understand, is to figure out what is the reason for decline in customer satisfaction and also to recommend the potential strategies to address these issues. Is that correct?
Exactly, that makes sense. And we just want to begin with understanding what are some of the reasons for why customer satisfaction ratings have declined.
Yes, absolutely. So my first question about the customer satisfaction. So can you please tell me, is that how long has been decline around? Is that like recent 2 years? Is that recent month?
That's a great question. We don't yet know specifically, so we can assume that we're sort of preparing for first proper discussion with the client. But we can assume it's somewhere within the scope of last year or so. What's important to note, just in case you're going in that direction, is that these complaints have not only come from one channel. As in the online channel is relatively new, it's only 2 years old, but it's not only from there. Yeah, so they also have from the physical stores.
That's actually what I wanted exactly to ask you in my next question, whether the customer service has been declining in the recent, like in the online channel or in all of our channels. So it's basically all of our channels, as I understood. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and one last question, does the client have anything in particular, any goal that they want to reach in terms of maybe like the ranking or is any numerical goal going on there?
No. Once again, let's assume that this is rather at the start of the discussion with them. Of course, goal setting will be something that will happen later on. For now, it's just about getting a perspective on the situation.
Of course. Okay, so let me take a couple of moments to gather my thoughts, if it's fine by you.
Absolutely. Take your time.
Thank you.
You can have commercials now for the YouTube audience.
Okay, so thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're welcome. Tell me.
so, okay, so I think that we should approach this problem, break it down into three main buckets where the potential root cause could lie. The first one
Mm-hmm.
is the quality of product. The second one is the
Mm-hmm.
quality of service. And the third one
Mm-hmm.
is overall atmosphere and overall experience in the shop, for example. So in terms of quality of product, I would like to take a look. Is there been any recent change in maybe the variety of products that we suggest, the quality of the
Yeah.
product itself, maybe the prices, maybe there's no sizes, maybe we don't address our specific market. Maybe there is like maybe problems with the market that we address is not exactly what they want. So that's about the product. In terms of quality of
Mm-hmm.
service, I would take a biggest look if we break it down, let's say, into a live platform and online platform. So in the online platform, uh, I would like to look at the like how responsive maybe the chat is. Is there like everything okay with the website? And in the live channels, I would like to look into the staff experience. Is their staff professional enough? Are we
Mm-hmm.
having like are the clients have their address their needs? Is their staff friendly? So are we having good experiences on that? And
Mm-hmm.
also about the waiting time in the shops, maybe the lines, maybe we're not using too much digitalized payment methods, and then there's like long lines in the shop. And in terms of
Mm-hmm.
overall atmosphere, if we look at the shops, I would just take a look at the how our shop is maintained. So like, is it clean? Is it nice? Is it nice music playing on the background? Is there any big problems that like emerge during the
Yeah.
customer's experience? And the same on the platform, like technical issues. Is the platform lagging? Are there bugs? Are there a lot of maybe commercials that aren't necessary? So I would like to take a look at those factors and simply to
Yeah.
understand what I would do if it was a real case. I would open the reviews and like read the reviews and maybe like categorize them on what is like the highest complaint that we get as the like I would read like there's 1,000
By
reviews, if
frequency.
20% of
Right.
this, yeah, the frequency of which complaint emerges
Mm.
most. And this is how I would like tackle it if it was a real case situation. I would try to like categorize all the complaints. So
Yeah.
um what do you think about this approach? Does it sound reasonable to you?
Yeah, it's not, that's fair. I think all of these things could potentially happen. Um, why don't I then share with you some additional information because we got from the client an overview of the results of a custom survey we ran them.
Okay.
Feel free to study the exhibit and then
Mm-hmm.
share with me some of the main insights that you can draw from it.
Just okay. Can you make it a bit bigger? I don't see it that. Wait, let me put it on my
Yeah.
bigger channel
Okay.
screen. No, it's fine.
This is
It's fine.
part of the challenge, Anya. It's
True, true. Need to be
there you go.
prepared for everything. Okay, thank you so much. So, okay, here we see two exhibits. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
the first one is what matters most to the customers. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there is like different percentages of how much it matters for online customers and in-store customers. So for example, we can
Mm-hmm.
see here that product availability, uh, it matters only to 30% of customers online. However, in
Mm-hmm.
store, it's like 70% of customers. And in terms of
Mm-hmm.
prices, is like the opposite situation. We can see that overall 70% of our customers online are really like the prices matter to them. And then
Yeah.
the second graph, it goes about okay, so there are three categories of product complaints, service complaints, and unsolved complaints. And we can see that the majority of unsolved complaints are for the bought in-store products. And if terms of product complaints is like 50-50, so our product is is like equally bad in the okay, I wouldn't say to the customer, but is there's equal amount of complaints both in the online and offline. So
Yeah.
what I would what I'm thinking about, so like product, if we look at the product, so there's like equal importance here, both to online and offline customers, and there's also equal amount of complaints. If we look at the service, for example, staff friendliness. we can see that it doesn't matter that much to bot online, but we can see that most of the complaints from staff friendliness come from bot in store. So if we divide our solution into bot online and bot in store, there are different things that we need to focus on and put our main focus once we tackle the online problem and once we tackle the in-store problem. And obviously, the unsolved complaints is a huge issue. I think this is one, again, I can see the percentages, but I don't know really what is the percentage of total amount of complaints is the unsolved complaints, but this is
The
something that is
volumes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I think unsolved complaints in general is really a big field of opportunity that we just miss. And it's like really, really unacceptable if we want to position ourselves as a good company on the market. And I think that we need to definitely focus on the solution of finding all unsolved, like how we solve all unsolved complaints, maybe hiring potential team to tackle those, or just improving, like maybe incentivizing our current employees for solving those complaints. So yeah, this is what I see by this exhibit. Honestly, for me, I think the importance is very good that we have those percentages. But for me, what I would do from now is actually I would like to see the volumes of each type of complaint. So I can see that, like, if we have only 100 complaints for unsolved, like for service, and 10,000 for product, the percentages, like, they don't really give me the full picture. So maybe you have the data on that.
Absolutely. Sadly, I don't, but I think that's a fair question.
Okay.
For the sake of the exercise, we can assume that actually the volumes are equal. And following up on that point, then it would seem like the problem is rather in store. Having that in mind, if you were to come up with a hypothesis at this point, your best educated guess on what's happening and what they should be doing, what would that be?
Okay. Can I take a second?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So basically, if I could give a couple of suggestions right now based on the data I have, I would break it down into complaints for the shop and complaints for the online channel. And for the shop, I think what is the most burning issue right now, the one that we need to solve first, is to take the unsolved complaints, which is 90% of unsolved complaints, and tackle this issue. Maybe we could hire a team that would deal with those complaints. Maybe we could, pay an effort and pay an attention of our employees. Maybe we could talk about, like, we could maybe talk about some hotline where the people can call, or maybe some person in each store can come and solve the things offline. I would also like to, regarding the shop, I think availability of the product is super important. So maybe to tackle that, we could, if there is a product unavailable, maybe we could ask the employees to approach the system and see in which branches of our shops this product is available in the specific size. Or maybe like set up the opportunity to, if I come and I want some shoes, some size, and it doesn't exist, and we do have it on our storage, maybe we could like set up some, come in 2-3 days, we will order it specifically for you. So, and the one thing that is super important for the shops, the last thing, is to make our staff more friendly. So first of all, I would like to understand why our staff is not friendly. Is there something that maybe they're unhappy with their conditions? Maybe they want something from their working place that they don't exactly give. And I would also make a unified training for all of our staff employees that would set a clear standard of customer friendliness. In terms of online channel, I think what is the most important here is basically make purchases as easy and as intuitive as possible. So maybe I would hire or just like give a task to our web developers and try to make the website easy, intuitive, easy to surf. And obviously, I would like to also set up a clear tech and customer support, maybe chatbot. I don't exactly know how our website operates right now, but that would be
Yeah.
my top recommendations for like what we can do
Mm,
already in the
mm.
closest couple of months.
Great. Okay. Wow. That's quite a lot of stuff. A lot of work ahead for them. Let's
True.
dive deeper into one area, which is that of helping our client develop a retraining program for their staff. So as you noticed from
Okay.
the exhibit, you were mentioning it as well. Um, some of these issues that they have regarding complaints are likely to be associated with how their staff interact with customers. So I'm
Yeah.
going to share with you some data. We know that this training program would cost them $91,000 to develop. This will be a
Mhm.
sort of upfront investment cost to develop the program itself. We have 350 customer service staff across our business, each of them compensated at a rate of $15 per hour. And it would take each staff member 16 hours to complete the training. So this is basically a period of time that we will be paying them for, but they won't actually be working. Yeah, so in a way, it's
Yes.
a cost. And what
Mhm.
we want to understand is the following. We want to understand by how many percentage points would customer satisfaction need to rise for the investment to make sense. And what we know is that for each percentage point increase, the business generates an additional $250,000 in revenue. So you increase customer satisfaction with 1 percentage point, the effect in revenue is 250K plus. And we want to
Okay.
figure out basically how many percentage points we would need in order to offset with the revenue and the cost that we're going to have from the program.
Yeah, I get it. Just a second. So let me quickly
Yeah,
recap to make sure I have all the data.
absolutely. Tell me.
Okay, so we need to set up the training program. It costs
Mm-hmm.
$91,000 to develop it. It's one-time payment.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We want to do the training program to 350 staff members. Each one of them gets a salary of $15 per hour, and the training takes 16 hours, which they're getting paid for $15 per hour.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, in terms of the return, we get $250,000 additional revenue to each 1 percentage point of increase in our customer satisfaction.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
our question is, by how many percentage points would we need to increase the customer satisfaction to break even with this initiative? Is
Yeah.
that correct? Okay.
Exactly.
Just one little question before I set up my structure. So in terms of the 250,000, this is the revenue. Do we assume some profit margin regardless of the training of the staff, like cost of the products, or in this calculation? Or we just say
No, you
revenue
can
is
assume
what we
that
get?
these are all the costs, just for simplicity. Yeah.
Okay. So just to quickly lay out my structure before I start solving it. So
Yeah.
basically, I will take the total investment, and
Mm-hmm.
then I will take the amount of stuff multiplied by the amount of hours multiplied by the amount of dollars that we pay them per hour. And this will be my
Yeah.
total cost. And then
Mm-hmm.
I will see how much it comes out. And then I will divide it by $250,000 to see the percentage
Mm-hmm.
points. Does
Yeah.
that? Okay, amazing. So let me
Yeah.
just do it
That makes
quickly.
sense. Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
great. Okay, so let's say 91,000 plus, and then we take how much we need to pay for each staff member. So 15 times
Mm-hmm.
16. 15 times 4 is 60. 60 times 4 is 200 for 240 $240 times 4 is 60. Yeah. So $240 and times 350 stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So $240 times 3 is going to be 720, and plus 120 It's gonna be 840, and we have 350 staff, 240. So we add to this 2 zeros. So it's gonna be, I think it's gonna be $84,000. Let me just do a quick sanity check. So we have 350. Yeah, it's gonna be 84,000 for total
Mm-hmm.
training for employees. And we plus
Mm-hmm.
84 to 91, so it's gonna be 175,000. And this is half. We actually need to raise our satisfaction level only by half of the percentage point because we get the total cost of the prop. You look confused. Am I on the right track?
I'm not sure it's half. It's 250 what they generate, and this is 175. It's just over half.
True. True. It's 350. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, 125. Okay. So basically we can take 175 and divide it by 250, 2.5. So if we divide it all by 5, it will be 50. And this will be 35. So 35. Okay, so it's 70%. So it's 0.7 percentage points.
Yeah, yeah.
0.7 percentage point. Sorry for the mistake. Thanks for correcting me.
No,
So
no worries. Yeah.
I think that 0.7 percentage points is, again, I don't know what our rating is currently, but it doesn't sound like too high of a number. And if we even reach our rating improvement by the 1 percentage point means we already profitable on that initiative. So initiative sounds pretty good to me. The only thing I want to know is actually do we have any prospect of by how many percentages this program will increase our satisfaction rate?
No, that's fair, and that's something that we'll need to figure out. And at the end
Hmm.
of the day, they should also think of other alternatives to this program. And actually, we can do that
Obviously.
together. So what else could they do?
What else could they do besides the training of the customers? Yeah,
Well, the
obviously there's
training of
like
the staff. Yeah.
of staff start. Obviously there's
Mhm.
opportunity cost of just simply hiring a new staff, which is more motivated and just, but I think that it might
Yeah.
also negatively affect the company's name, just laying off 350 employees. So that is not maybe that feasible. We could also maybe suggest we like the competition, not exactly the competition between the employees, but maybe some incentive system that will cost cheaper than this training program. So let's say if you have a personal satisfaction
Hmm.
score by the customers that you train to the certain, like
Hmm.
raised to the certain amount, we are paying you a bonus of let's say $100, and then it will cost us cheaper than the training program. But at the same time, we will
Hmm.
have the employees more motivated to um, to improve their
Hmm.
just their service. On the other hand, we could also do like this is like the carrot. We could also go with the stick. So maybe like penalized if your customer satisfaction is low, if you have too many complaints on you from the customers, you might get maybe certain penalizing system,
Hmm.
So that could be the potential options, alternatives to this training. But I think training is a good idea overall because first of all,
Hmm.
it's positive, it's growing our employees with us. It's not just like, okay, we're focusing on the profits and we don't care. It's showing the employees that
Hmm.
we want them to grow. It can be good in the long term. And it also, I think, is not that expensive for the amount of the impact it can give. Because even if we raise our ranking by 1 percentage point, we are already profitable, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Good. I think all of these are good ideas that we could look into in the future.
Hmm.
Let's assume that you would meet with the client, want to provide them with a sort of synthesis recommendation of where we are at this point. Feel free to take some
Sure.
time if you'd like to, and then we can discuss it.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Just a second. I will take a second.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm not muted. So Thank you so much for this interesting project. It's been a pleasure working with you. We have developed a few short-term recommendations for right now that you can do in order to address this issue. So, first, we would like you to focus on the quality of service in your shops. And to do that, you
Mm-hmm.
could introduce the training program for your employees, which will be very profitable in terms that we only need less than 1 percentage point of improvement to break even, which is a very great solution. In addition to that, you could maybe add some incentive for the employees to hire their services.
Yeah.
In terms of the tech platform, we would suggest you to generally redesign your platform and improve your customer service experience. And in terms of the unsolved complaints, this is a very big issue, very hot one that we need to definitely pay some attention in the closest future. So maybe we could suggest you to hire some specific team or just pay overall extra hours to your customer support to solve all the unsolved complaints, because this is a very critical one. And this is the
Mm-hmm.
short-term recommendations. We would like to keep working with you to develop more long-term recommendations. And thank you for your time.
Good. Thank you very much as well. And let's pause here.
Okay.
Yeah. How did it feel?
It felt good. I think once the structure like knocked me off because it wasn't that standard, and I was like, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
can think. And then when I saw the exhibit, I was like, damn, I forgot to what the customer even cares about most, like, you know. So when I saw exhibit,
Yeah,
it
that's
was
quite
like a little
important.
hint at, yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
so I think I kind of blacked out. Uh,
Yeah.
Overall, the math mistake, it was just because it's such a simple math, and because I'm a bit too confident with the simple math, I was like, yeah, it's a half, and then it's not.
Yeah.
Uh, but overall, I really enjoyed the experience. I really enjoyed the case. I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's not like regular case, so it's cool. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for that. And it was just
No,
pleasure
pleasure.
solving it with you. You're so positive, and thank you. What do
I'm
you
just
think?
playing the positive persona. It can be different.
Oh, okay,
Good.
okay.
No, I'm joking. Good. But anyway, I also thank you as well for going through the case, and I think you did a very good job. And it's clear to me that you're definitely a rather experienced candidate. You've done quite a few cases. You sort of know what the expectations are and how to go through the case. You have a very good pace. If anything, too fast, so you can slow down. And in general, I was left with the impression that you have several strengths. So definitely on the numericals and analytical logic, you were quite good at quickly understanding basically what needed to be done and to develop the approach and do the numbers and so on. And because you are confident in this thing, it sort of worked against you. We can discuss
Hmm.
this in a minute. And at the same time, I also believe you have a strong business sense, so you could actually think through the situation. You already sort of developing hypotheses from the beginning as to what might be happening, and then really tailoring every point that you are making about what they're doing. Um, the areas that so first of all, with these strengths, I think they're great that you have them. You need to take them to the next level. So these should be your big bets to really make them obvious as spikes in the interview, and we can discuss in the detailed feedback what you should be doing to do this. In terms of areas of development, from my perspective, it's structuring and top-down communication. And connected to this, your ability to really focus on what is the question that you're being asked, and then answering specifically that rather than what you imagine the interviewer wants to hear. So anyway, let's basically get into the specifics. I'll also provide you after the session with the scorecard that contains the detailed feedback. So feel free to take notes if you want. Otherwise, you'll have the feedback written anyway. So basically, we had case framework, data interpretation, calculation, brainstorming, recommendation. These are also the 5 types of questions. I mean, you
Yeah.
always get variations of these, but these are the 5. in a typical interview, you usually get 3-4 questions. So most interviews these days, they don't even ask you for a recommendation, mostly because the recommendation sort of has a recipe for how it should be communicated. And then, yeah, it's actually not that interesting for interviewers because you don't get to see that much about the candidate. I think you can find out more interesting things from how they structure something rather than how they do the recommendation. So let's start with the case framework, which was right at the beginning. I like that you had a top-down structure. It was well communicated. I like your tone. You're clear, you're confident, and it has a good speed. So in a way, it was easy to follow you. I didn't feel like I had to, slow down the recording just so I understand what you're saying. A lot of candidates rush. Yeah. So you're in the sweet spot. You should keep doing that. What I would change in the sort of order in which I observed them, start by playing back the prompt to the interviewer. You basically started by asking follow-up questions. It helps to play back the prompt, not only because it's a sort of expectation, it's almost like, how should I put it? It's almost like a ritual of case practice. Not only that, but it's also because it's useful for you to validate that the information that you have is correct. And also because it's useful for you in your own mind to synthesize the situation of the client so it becomes clear where they are and what they need to do. Then you can ask afterwards the questions about the client. I would avoid, however, asking typical questions. After having done, so I've done like about close to 800 coaching sessions by now, and there's a pattern. So there's some questions that candidates typically ask. Is there a specific target numerically? Is one of them. And it's almost like a sort of bug that they each give to each other through peer practice, because I keep on hearing it from everybody. There isn't a problem in of itself with asking that question. The only thing that it does is that in the eyes of the interviewer, you then seem a bit like a typical candidate. Like, here's another candidate that did a lot of practice and learned frameworks, and they just have like a sort of typical way of executing on cases. And all of a sudden, you just seem a bit less original. Connected to this is using the word bucket, which has the same effect in the mind of the interviewer. It's like, it's another person with the buckets, So these are very small, but then they add up, and they're important because they're also at the beginning. So they affect the perception that the interviewer has on you. You can use something like areas or whatever. Pick topic, whatever works for you. Yeah.
I just used it because I was
Then
stressed, Usually I try to think about some other word and I'm like,
absolutely.
bucket.
Absolutely. I understand. But
It's gonna be
that's the
stressful on
whole
the
thing. I
interview.
think that's why a lot of great organizations, corporate, military, whatever, they put so much focus on training, because being very good in training, it shows then when the actual situation happens, so you need in the training to be very good and have these things develop and to reflect your usual way of operating, so that even under stress conditions, you fall to the level of your preparation, basically. Then what I would change, so you have the structure, which in and of itself I liked because it was original. So this is not a template. Yeah, this is great. You were looking at basically the product, the service, you're looking at the atmosphere and so on. And you have a few good points under each of them. My complaint, so to say here, is that I'm actually not confident that this is missing, because I kind of have the impression that there are things that are quite important that you didn't mention. It's almost like you're not really covering the entire spectrum of the problem. And, customer wants is one of the things, like you mentioned later on, external aspects as well. Maybe there are also shifts in the market that you should consider. So what I would recommend instead is to think of structures which are inherently messy. Yeah, so one of them, for example, could be a customer journey. And a customer journey structure actually works quite well generally in cases that have to do with the customer. Basically, here it could have been literally customer lands on the channel. It could be online or store or whatever. Customer browses the product range. customer basically selects the product, then
Mhm.
they or put it in the basket online. They do the payment, they pick it up or have it delivered, and last they return it if they don't like it. But literally, these sort of 5, 6 steps are all of the steps. Like this is the journey. Yeah, that there's nothing
Mhm.
additional. So then you have the confidence that by looking at the spectrum, you're actually being really broad and comprehensive. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then it's
true.
rather on you to make sure that you also drill down sufficiently under each of these sort of steps in the journey. But aspire to look for these sort of structures that give you the comprehensive view and don't create the possibility for you to leave out important aspects. And of course, there isn't such a thing as perfect MISI, because even in the example that I just gave you with having the customer journey, it's very easy then to forget about the external perspective that I was mentioning beforehand, in the sense that maybe actually they haven't changed much, but the shops in the area have become better. Or maybe there's more crime in the area. So there are lots of complaints about people getting to the store, and by just looking
Yeah.
at the customer journal, it'll be more difficult to identify these things. So then, for example, you could merge into a structure which looks at sort of internal aspects and external aspects, while at the same time not trying to present it in such a classical way, internal, external, which is sort of a typical framework. Yeah. So it's about combining some of these elements. And in general, you shouldn't necessarily aim for perfection with MISI, but as much as possible, try to be broad and deep
Yeah.
and insightful to actually calibrate the context of the client situation. I feel like you have a question.
I do. You feel good. Like you feel correct. I'm just thinking about like I agree, and I think that it's amazing advice. I was just, like all those things that you mentioned, when you spoke about, like, for example, the crime or the competition, when I was
Yeah,
building my structure, they slided from my mind. I was thinking about them,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I didn't know how to make a structure that will accommodate all those things. So I was like, okay, I'll just put overall experience. And but at the same time, I'm thinking, because sometimes what I was receiving as a feedback from other people, that my structures are way too like much. I have like 3, 4 buckets. Each bucket has its own story, and it's like you
yeah,
don't really touch all this in the case. So the way to find
absolutely.
this middle ground with 20 elements of the structure, or something like super simplistic that is not
Yeah,
completely missing. So that's my
yeah, yeah,
question to you. How would you structure that to find this
yeah.
middle ground?
Yeah, I mean, basically, there is no ideal duration of an answer, but typically, just so you have a sort of anchoring effect, it's more around 4 minutes, 5 minutes or so, especially for
Hmm.
MBBs. Then there's a question of nuance. So with McKinsey, they really like this thing of broad, deep, and insightful, and the structures tend to be quite big. Yeah. Whereas with BCG Payne and most of other firms which tend to do candidate-led interviews, the structures tend to be more narrow and hypothesis-driven because they're meant to be operational. Like you use that thing
Hmm.
to then do the rest of the case. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so in general, I would tell you to aspire for their 4 to 5 minute mark. Use that as guidance. Then really try to calibrate the structure to that particular client situation. So to try as much as possible to think through first principles. And it's difficult to explain it within the scope of this session now because it's something that I often work with candidates through several sessions. But it's this idea of actually going down to the core assumptions that the client has about their own situation, what they want to do, breaking that down to first principles, validating their assumptions, and then building it back up, you know. But in this particular situation, the quick and easy thing would be to find once again a sort of intrinsic MISI structure, which is a journey,
Yeah.
because then you have these big steps in the process. Or to use something like internal, external, but disguise it a bit. So you could have also a combination of the two. So for example, you have the internal where you deep dive and you have the customer journey, and then you have the external and you actually look at the factors that would have to do with everything until the customer gets the channel. Yeah.
That's interesting.
And lastly, it's not about perfection. It's just they want to see how you think through this. So even you just having this sort of a discussion with them already points to the fact that you're a valuable candidate, rather than going there and saying, well, I'm going to look at customer, competition, and company. So I guess I just heard this 3 more times today, like then it's this sort of label you clearly as somebody who is at best average in that sense. Right. One more point here before we move on. So I just wanted to tell you to be very, very careful with how the question is formulated. Basically, this question was very prescriptive. The framework question was actually a disguised brainstorming question because it was asking you for actual ideas. It was asking you, what are some of the reasons why this is happening? And then the bullet points and the structure should be actual things. The payment doesn't work. They don't accept this card. They only, whatever, do only PayPal. They often don't have change in the store. The cashier is not there, so things that have to do specifically with that thing. What you did is more exploratory. So you basically laid out questions, analyses, things that you'd want to find out. So try to be in a way more prescriptive and actually point out to the reasons. And that's once again, it's a thing of nuance, but once you add everything up, it has a big effect. Then we had data interpretation. Now, with the data interpretation, I'm going to share the exhibit once again. Right. So in general, I perceived as somebody who understood the exhibit. I like that you were proactive, great energy, business sense. You took this exhibit and you did something with it. So that's great. Yeah. What I would change technique-wise, start by reading the exhibit with the interviewer, ask questions about it if something doesn't make sense. And then take time to actually come up with insights. You sort of did it on the spot. You took very, very little to no time to think about it. And it's just important to know that this is not expected. This is not, you don't win points through this. And it then also makes it virtually impossible for you to have a good answer, a structured answer. It pushes you to be more descriptive than prescriptive, so a lot of issues are just caused by the fact that you don't get to take time. So what I would recommend, basically start reading the exhibit to the interviewer, describe what you see in terms of the data without interpreting. So you can see, I see 2 bar charts, the upper one represents this, blah, blah, blah. So you walk through it, you ask questions, what are unresolved complaints? You want to find out what the data represents. Then you take time to actually digest the data. And in that time, you should ideally come up with a couple of bullet points, which start from a data point, but then build on it and explain what's happening there, and then what the client should do as a consequence of it. So let me give you an example here. I find the exhibit. Yeah. So what we see in the first exhibit is that just even without looking at the label. So if I'm looking at it from afar, I see some have a lot of orange, some have a lot of blue. Yeah. And there's one in the middle, which is half. By the way, if stuff is half, so if stuff doesn't say much, don't even discuss it because it's pointless. There's no reason to discuss everything in the exhibit. Some things are just not important. So with product, actually, we can't say much. Seems like product-wise, it's kind of fine. But we notice something else, that for in-store, product availability and staff friendliness matter the most, whereas in online, ease of purchase and prices and promotions matter the most. This is just a data point. Yeah. Now, what that means, it means that for in-store, it's likely that we had stockouts, and this is what might have caused this particular situation. So maybe clients are frustrated because they come to the store to buy something and we don't have it, or we don't have the right size. It's creating frustrations. Or it has to do with staff friendliness. So the way our staff interact with them is not to their expectations. And this is happening frequently enough to trigger this problem. Now, as a next step, now I'm sort of becoming prescriptive I can't give a recommendation at this point, by the way, because I don't have enough information, but I can at least request additional data or lay out the steps to explain to them what I would need to know in order to give a recommendation. So in this case, I could say, for example, that, well, to validate the product availability hypothesis I mentioned earlier, we will want to get data from their stores, figure out if they have stock out that they reported. We also want to do some mystery shopping and figure out on our own if this is a thing that happens in the stores. We want to discuss with some staff in the stores and get more granularity on the sort of complaints that are related to product availability. And we could also discuss with shoppers in the region, maybe existing customers, regular customers, to get their perspective. And all these data points should then confirm or reject this idea that product availability is a problem. If this turns out to be not such a big problem, it's just something that matters to customers, but we're actually delivering on this area, then it most likely have to do with staff readiness. And here, once again, we can do lots of things. We can do a customer survey that deep dives into staff readiness. We can do mystery shopping again. We could speak with shoppers. We could speak with our employees and figure out what's making them frustrated. We can do exit interviews with employees of ours that recently left. We could look at the incentives that we have for our employees and our compensations. We can do lots of things in order to figure out if this is the problem. But basically what I did here is that I sort of started from a data point, explained the trend, and then laid out the next steps. And this is just one of them for one of the exhibits. But then you can do the same for the second exhibit. And ideally you should have 2 or 3 of these where you're able to come up with different trends and then at the end sort of connect the dots and provide a sort of story for the client.
Yeah.
And the story in this particular situation is that it seems like they are struggling mostly with the in-store experience. Because once again, just look at the colors. Yeah, there's a lot of orange. They're struggling mostly with the in-store experience, mostly around what has to do with service and staff readiness and unresolved complaints. So the hypothesis that we have at this moment is that our staff are not doing a great job in interacting with our customers and solving their complaints, which is why if you come up with a sort of story at this point, you can already suggest in the interview, sort of take the lead, what would be the next steps? What could they do? Such as, for example, do a training program, which is where the case goes anyway next. Let me know if you have any questions at this point.
Yeah, I do. I think that this is like super insightful, and I think like I kind of tried to do this, but maybe I just didn't communicate it correctly because I did try to see like obviously like first I read the exhibit, then my mistake was that I didn't take some time to come up with real insights and not just, oh, this is a lot, this is a little. What really like maybe confused me is that I didn't have the volumes. So I was like, I think that's what confused me, because if there was like 10% are all the customer complaints about the product and 90 about the service, it would be more intuitional to me to come up and say, oh, there's a problem in the service, let's move on to that. But I did try to, for example, about the unsolved complaints, I did try to like, hypothesize that we could maybe provide the team to solve those complaints, So I don't know like how I could see that what was my intention. And then from your feedback, I can see that that's not what happened. So my question is to you is like, when you're telling me this feedback, like you didn't, as an interviewer, you didn't see that I actually tried to provide some next steps and this is the question.
Yeah. What I could see is that the intention was there, but it wasn't communicated in a structured way, which is what I was saying at the start of the feedback. So I could see the fact that you understood the trends and you had a business sense, so you understand the dynamics. But I wasn't convinced by the way you communicated it in terms of how structured the answer was.
Yeah.
So ideally, if you visualize it, try to basically be able to come up with 2-3 bullet points. Within each of these bullet points, you have a data point, explain what it means, what the client should do, or next steps. Yeah, you have 2-3 of these. And then at the end, you almost take a step back and try to connect the dots. What's the story? This is sort of the shape that you should aspire to. And like with everything that requires mastery, it's about aspiring to get the shape, getting the shape, and then being able to break the rules selectively, And you're basically at the first stage at which you're integrating these elements and making them work. So it's also just a question of practice. What I would recommend you to do specifically is to practice exhibit interpretation, but without the pressure of time. So for now, just focus on technique. Take as much time as you want. Forget about the timer. Try to basically squeeze all the potential insights from the exhibit and get good at basically connecting the dots to come up with a story, and then gradually reintroduce the time pressure. And that's about it.
Okay.
And then it's going to feel smoother. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. You're welcome. So on the calculations, great job on clarifying the scope of the questions. Asking follow-up questions is super important to know the data that you have available and the question that you need to answer. And funny enough, it's a place where most people fail. They don't really understand what they need to do. So then everything else becomes impossible afterwards. Super clean logic on how you need to do it. Accurate computations, aside from that small slip up. What I would change actually is to build more buffers of time. So what that means is basically you were confident in your math skills. And because of this, you didn't even take time between clarifying the scope of the questions and coming up with the logic. You basically just provided it on the spot. I think you were able to do that because your level of skill is higher than the complexity of this question. But if you attempt the same thing in a situation where the complexity of the question is higher than your level of your skill, you're going to be in trouble. So then you need a good technique to protect you in that particular situation. And the simple thing to do is to just take time. Even if the question is simple, it's good to take time, not so much to think about the logic, though of course you can use the time to actually validate the logic, but to start thinking about how to best communicate it so you're persuasive and clear in your interaction with the interviewer, and to emphasize this sort of co-creation aspect of the calculation question, because the entire interview is meant to be a simulation of the interaction with the client. And then it's important to not just deliver on the numbers, but to pull them in and co-create the approach with them. But the approach was fine. I believe it could have been better communicated, but basically I validated the approach. And then once again, instead of taking time, you started doing the computations. You don't need to do the computations live. You can take time. I think this is once again something that's mostly propagated from candidate to candidate when it says that you are not assessed on whether you're doing the computations live. What a lot of people hear after interviews is that you didn't walk us through the computations, and they understand this to mean that they should have done the computations live with the interviewer. But what the feedback actually says is that you need to take the interviewer through the operations so they understand how you got to the number. But you can do them sequenced in the sense that you can first take time and do the computations. And once you have clarity on them and you know they're right, then you can take the interview step by step through them. Because the time when you're trying to do the computations live, it's also difficult for me to follow. So basically you're saying stuff like 840, adding 2 zeros. I think, no, wait, let me just do. So, you know, when you hear this, your brain as the person also switches off. So then you come up and you say, so it's 84,000. And I said, yes, it's 84,000 because I recognize the number because I know the case. But if I was somebody who didn't know the case, so a client, for example, in that situation, I would be a bit confused at that point, and I either have to go with you out of trust, or I'm like, well, actually, I don't understand what this number comes. So can we go back? You know? So instead, basically, do the computations on your own, and then take them step by step. So first step, I'm going to multiply this with this and this. This gives us this number. Then I take that number and I divide it by whatever. You know, so literally line by line through the computations. And don't rush in general. It doesn't help. Like that's because in an interview, by the way, the fact that you made that calculation mistake, they won't hold it against you. They will never fail you because of this. They can see that you're good at maths. You're just trying to do well, and that's how it appeared. Of course, ideally, you wouldn't have that mistake, but also don't worry too much about it. These things happen. I made mistakes in all of my interviews. Somehow, I still passed. So, and as a last point here, just about the interpretation. So, the interpretation that you had, you basically said it doesn't sound like too high of a number, which is fair. I could say the same, but do we actually know if that's true? We don't, because we don't know really the industry. So in the end, what I would rather say in practice is that I would just lay out the data that I would need or the people that I would need to speak with in order to validate that. So you could say that we would actually want to speak with some experts, some of our experts, and validate that this is a feasible range, whether they've seen it with other clients. We want to figure out how previous programs have performed. We want to also look into alternative things that we could do and what would be the success rate of those things. Maybe, for example, what they could do is they could also sort of rank their staff by customer friendliness. Consider getting rid of the low performers, we're shifting them into other roles which are not customer facing, then getting the top best performing ones to retrain the rest of the cohort. This is likely to be cheaper. It's basically doing the sort of synergy of internal knowledge and sharing best practices, so they could do that, for example. And you could basically see this kind of stuff in the interpretation. So adding value by showing your thinking around that number without speaking about the number itself. And this is also what happens in practice. Because as a consultant, you often get to a number, you don't know. I mean, how would I know that number is fine? But I can have a discussion around what I believe we should do in this project in order to validate that number. Then
That makes sense.
you had brainstorming. So for brainstorming, you had very good ideas. I think I also took you a bit by surprise in the sense that you didn't almost consider like a formal question, and then you started shooting from the hip with ideas. The ideas were good, but once again, the way I would take your performance to the next level is that I would put more emphasis on having an upfront structure. So it's in a way, brainstorming questions are the same thing as frameworks. You need to take a bit of time, come up with some areas, present the ideas under each of them. And I think you could have perfectly done that had you taken half a minute. Yeah, because the ideas, once again, in and of themselves were good, which is hard to fix because if you didn't have the idea, then that's a very different problem. What I would also change in terms of the content and how I would take it to the next level is that I would work a bit more on actually assessing the ideas. So instead of providing ideas, explaining through the filter of what you know about the client and what they're aspiring to do and where they are and so on, evaluating those ideas a bit more. So what are the pros? What are the cons? Providing a sort of framework that's operational for them to actually somehow select between those ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Then last, we had a recommendation. You were confident and direct. I like that. What I would change is that I would start by restating the client's mission instead of providing directly the recommendation. That's important, once again, not only as a sort of ritual kind of way that this is the expectation, but also because it helps you refocus as a candidate on what was the case about to begin with. Yeah, and then to be able to adjust your recommendation live to that particular point. And what I would change in terms of the content specifically is that I would be a bit more careful with how strong or how confident you are about the recommendations. Because, for example, you mentioned this point about them optimizing their website. This is not wrong, but I think you would struggle to prove why it's right, because we don't really have data at this point where we haven't developed arguments during the course of the case to have it as supporting evidence, and then you can't recommend it. Because what tends to happen even in practice is that you tell the client, I believe you should do this, and they ask why. And if you don't have an answer to the why, you shouldn't be recommending stuff, So that's rather the point. So that's pretty much everything that I had in mind. Happy to answer any follow-up questions, but overall, good job. I think you have a very, very good foundation to build on, and you're not very far from being interview ready. So I usually score on a 1 to 10 scale. 8, consistently 8 and above, to my mind, is being interview ready, and you're around the 7 mark. So the gap is not big, but of course, it's like with everything, the last mile is also the hardest to close, but I'm confident we can do it. Cool. Tell me if you have questions or anything that you'd like to. No worries.
First of all, I wanted to thank you because the recommendations are super insightful. Some many things that I could never think about myself. So thank you so much. It's
You're
really,
welcome.
really great, really helpful. Uh, yeah, I do have actually a few questions I prepared to you in advance a little bit. So
Okay.
it's about just in general, like because when I prepare from different platforms, and one coach says something, another one says completely
Yeah.
something else, and then you're like, oh, okay, so what should I actually do?
Yeah.
So for example, about the brief and the prompt and the opening. So I know that there are some platforms and coaches that say you should definitely do the brief. You should definitely like clarify and give yourself a space of time. And then there are some platforms that say never do the brief. You're just wasting time of the interviewer. So like, what is
Jesus.
the actual, yeah.
Yeah.
So like go straight to the questions. Don't
I
do the brief.
understand.
Or if you do, do one sentence,
Yeah.
you know? So that's my
Yeah.
question. But
Yeah. No, I understand the confusion. I remember that I was equally confused when I was prepping because everybody's saying different things. And then I sort of got the job and moved on in life, and I realized that actually with everything that you want to learn, there's always people saying different things, you know? So
yeah.
the point that I've arrived at personally and professionally is that you should always take elements that work from different approaches and then put
Hmm.
them together yourself into what works for you. But
Hmm.
to be a bit more prescriptive, I would always go back to first principles again, but basically it's just this idea of what is it that you're actually optimizing for? Are you optimizing for time, as in to try to fit as much content in the interview? Then you should skip the clarifying of the, yeah.
Okay.
Are you trying to make sure that you really understand what the case is about? Then you should definitely um, play back the prompt to validate it, you know? So
Yeah.
it really depends what you're optimizing for. That's why there isn't the objectively best approach. I believe that it's important to play back the prompt because once again, it helps you validate the information and it helps you synthesize the situation of the client in your head. And basically the almost like subconscious already starts working and generating ideas. And this is very different than basically hearing something and just starting to talk directly. Even from a
Agree.
communication psychological standpoint, emotional intelligence standpoint, it's important to play back what that other person said. In every book of communication, they tell that if somebody says something, you should use the same words and play it back to them. So this also contributes then connecting with the interviewer. You know, so in a way, see, there's a lot of reason why you should do it, but of course, it takes time. It takes 30 seconds or however much you use.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think in general, when I do the cases, I'm pretty much like trying to balance. Like maybe
yeah,
that's why, for example, in this case, I noticed that you gave me a lot of like, oh, you should have taken the time out there, and you didn't. You jumped straight into because
yeah,
I feel like from what I received in the feedback that I talk too much and take too much time of everything. So I need to like concise. And I was like, okay, this is my coach session. This is my chance to be as concise as I can. And I missed on some
yeah,
things that went through my head. Like, for example, the peer training that you mentioned, it was on the tip of my tongue, but I didn't like because I wanted to optimize and make it concise. Like, so I think
yeah,
what is important is like the balance. I think like to the people who watch this video, I would also give this advice. And maybe I just wanted like to ask you what I can do when I could keep on my practices, just like how do I approach my practice from now on? So yeah, I grasped the basics, I know the frameworks, I know how it
yeah,
goes, like I know the calculations. What do I do from now on to become from, okay, she's experienced candidate, she knows what to ask and what to answer,
yeah,
to like, oh, she's outstanding candidate, she's our hire, you know?
yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So basically, let me just start with the top-down communication point. So in order to communicate better, aside from the fact that you need practice, which is obvious, and this is something that sort of consultants work on throughout their career. Yeah, and there's always a difference between somebody who's a BA and somebody who's a senior partner and how they communicate. Aside from this, what works is to speak slower and to take time. Because if you speak slower than you can think, then usually the stuff that comes out isn't great. And there's a very strong case for actually speaking slower. You also come across as being more confident. Communication is more structured, more concise, more persuasive, lots of reasons. It just happens that in practice, when people are nervous, they tend to speak fast. And in case studies, they're nervous and they feel like it's a speed test. And this just combines into an avalanche of speech, you know? So just basically try to build in these buffers of time. And when you do cases, record yourself and then study yourself and just study yourself a bit later. Yeah, not immediately after the recording. So you're in a different state of mind and you can see yourself more objectively, give yourself feedback. In terms of how you should take things to the next level, basically take the feedback that I gave you now. You can use the scorecard that I will provide you, but you can also use that and then put together almost like on a blank sheet of paper, like 10 points that you need to work on. And for every new case that you do, focus on 1 point at a time, so that basically you internalize these things gradually rather than trying to do everything at once, which is virtually impossible. Yeah. When you practice, focus on quality, not quantity, which means that use every case as a building block. Take the time to reflect after the case on what went well, what didn't, and why, and what you're going to do differently next time. So you actually get better with each case rather than just going through a lot of them. And then for you, it's also about getting exposure to more people who know how to do cases or who know what they look for in candidates, which means aside from interactions like with me, to do cases with other experienced candidates and to do cases with existing consultants if you have friends in the industry.
Yeah, but I'm afraid to ask them because they're so busy with their consultant jobs. So. But yeah, maybe I
Yeah,
will try.
but take it like baptism by fire. No, it's a bit like something that you'll do in the job as well. You'll have to interact with people who are very busy, and you'll have to ask them for stuff that takes away their time, and you need to be persuasive and in a way find a way for everybody to win out of the situation. So take it as a challenge. But I understand. I think people are always willing to help. If you just pick the right time. I would just be very mindful with what you ask of them and how much you ask of them. So don't contact random people. Hey, do you want to do a case with me? Why would I? Like I'm running from one thing to the other every day. Why should I take 1 hour to meet with a random person? Like this is what I imagine an average person would say. So then rather seek to resort to people that you maybe know or the people that you know could put you in touch with. Ask for less, ask for basically connecting for 10 minutes to just give you some suggestions on how to best prepare or something like that and build from there. Maybe the relationships goes further. Maybe that person volunteers to do a case with you, what some people do. So I would rather take it gradually in that sense.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great advice. Thank you. Okay, so thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your advices. It was super insightful.
Thank
I
you as
really,
well.
really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. It was a great experience.
Super. Okay, then let's stay in touch. Thanks a lot for volunteering for this. You
Sure.
did a great job and best of luck with the rest of the prep. If you have any questions, reach out. And that's about it.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day. We'll speak soon.
Okay. You
Ciao.
too. Have a good night. Bye bye.